Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight, where we shine the light and talk with business leaders from all over the world who are here sharing their insights and wisdom so we can all grow together. I'm your host, Heidi Schalk, co-founder of HLH Growth Solutions, where we help businesses grow revenue through outside-the-box visibility strategies. If you're new to this podcast, we're glad to have you here. Welcome. Please stay to the end because we have a special gift just for you. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my guest today, Scott Stout with MedVector. So welcome, Scott, to the podcast.
Hi, Heidi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to learn more about you and MedVector. So can you kick us off and share a little bit about yourself, MedVector, and your role within it?
Sure. So my name is Scott Stout, as you mentioned, and I'm the CEO of MedVector. And MedVector, we're in the clinical trial space, and there's a real problem in the clinical trial space that there's a catch-22 that exists between the FDA and HIPAA privacy laws. And so the problem is the FDA says that you have to prove efficacy and patient safety through standardized data. And so in order to do that, you have to find patients to participate in your clinical studies. And not only do you need, healthy patients, but you need patients that also have that ailment to prove that it's actually working, right? That prove that efficacy. And so while the FDA says that you have to do that before you can market a new medicine, well, HIPAA privacy laws say you can't buy a list of people who have X. So how in the world are you supposed to enroll these clinical trials? And so this has created a huge dilemma within the industry to where it's created a multi-billion-dollar sub-industry called patient recruitment. And today, patient recruitment is terrible. Just point blank, it's terrible. It consists primarily of billboards and Facebook ads. So Heidi, I like to ask everybody this. When was the last time you dialed a phone number off a billboard?
I don't think I've ever dialed a phone number off of a billboard.
Yeah, you and everybody else. So you can imagine how well this industry is going, right? So right now what it does is it says, got psoriasis, call this phone number, right? And so without telling you anything about it, is it trying to fix it? What? So you would have to be so engaged or have such an issue with your psoriasis to be actively looking for solutions to dial a phone number off a billboard. Or worse, answer a Facebook ad, because it's similar. It's got psoriasis, click this ad, and then they have to screen you. So then now they're asking for your phone number, your email, your diagnosis, and all of this stuff. And you're like, well, this feels weird for an ad. Tell me more about it. But they can't. So right now, what's happening is the average time for a new medicine to get to market is between 10 and 14 years.
Wow.
So it's really this very major bottleneck. To give you another example of the problem, the average phase 2 study or phase 3 study requires typically between 1,000 and 2,000 participants. The average clinical trial site has 3. So you can imagine if they've got 3 per year, how long this takes in order to get these new drugs approved. And then there's some, other real problems with it, with like when COVID happened, right? Because there wasn't a way for us to do a touchless clinical study. There wasn't a way for us to do a remote clinical study. So everybody was just, kind of trying to figure it out. And telemedicine existed before COVID, but nobody was using it. So that was a real big catalyst for telemedicine, and that's been a huge help with our company. So that's the problem of the industry. What MedVector does is we've said the traditional patient recruitment is broken, right? Let's throw it away. Let's stop trying to go direct to patients and asking them to call phone numbers. Instead, let's talk to your doctor.
Yeah.
Sounds novel, right?
So outside the box.
Yeah. So it turns out, correct me if I'm wrong, that patients want to hear about clinical studies from their doctor.
Yeah, I would
You're
think
kidding. Right? So that's what we do. We've found ways to incorporate treating physicians into the clinical trial process, enabling them to share their patients with clinical trial sites without the fear of losing them to another doctor.
What you just shared seems like a no-brainer. Patients trust their doctor. Their doctors understand their ailments better than anyone. They're going to know if they're a right fit or not because they know their patients, they're close with them. They've been through the journey with them. So yeah, it just makes sense that, this wasn't happening before.
Right.
So
And I agree with you. And so, MedVector was founded. So my background, I was a financial analyst. So I was an option strategist for Morgan Stanley.
mm,
And I was then recruited to Wells Fargo Private Bank as part of an ultra large net worth wealth management team. And the way that we ran our team was we were essentially free analysts. So when you're dealing with that level of wealth, you're typically not dealing with employees. You're typically dealing with business owners.
mm,
And so what we did is we got to know our clients' businesses as best as we could, and then we'd make recommendations for them and make introductions. And and so, to speak to the no-brainerness of what MedVector does, I was introducing two of our customers. One was a private equity business that bought hospitals, and the other was a data analytics company used for hospital turnarounds. So this was kind of a no-brainer to introduce these two CEOs in just kind of a free brainstorming, non-salesy style conversation to see if we could identify more revenue streams for the private equity company.
mm,
And randomly, we started talking about clinical trials. And I asked the private equity company, I said, why aren't you doing clinical trials in your hospitals? And he said, well, we would, but we don't know how. Right. So we don't have the relationships with pharma. We don't know what doctors we would need. We don't know what the pipeline looks like. And as a private equity company, they model everything. And they said, if we can't model it, we don't do it. And so then I asked a really dumb question that changed my life. And so that dumb question was, why don't you refer your patients to the other hospitals that are doing clinical research and collect the referral fee? Now, at first glance, that sounds like a reasonable question until I got his answer. And his answer was, because I don't want my customers walking into another hospital.
mm.
Oh, crap. I'd forgotten that patients were customers in this conversation. So, backpedaling as quickly as I could, I said, well, what if we found a turnkey clinical trial company that lands their people in your hospital, does some sort of profit sharing, and then when the study is over, they up and leave? He thought about it. He said, go find me that. So we went looking for that. And it turns out that that didn't exist. And then we took it a step further and said, well, why would we need to land boots on the ground at all? Why couldn't we use this new thing? This was pre-COVID. Why couldn't we use this new thing called telemedicine? So it turned out the idea was sound. And a couple of meetings later, I raised my hand. I said, all right, guys, if I do it, do I have the support of everybody? And they looked at me cross-eyed going, wait, what? Now I'd made a bunch of money for all these guys, right? I was their wealth manager. And they went, wait, you're going to do it? I said, yeah, guys, maybe you don't understand what we've just identified here. We've created a potential Uber, right? Because we've figured out how to solve a major problem using existing technology that requires no inventory.
Yeah.
So that was when MedVector was born.
Thank you for sharing that, because that was my question for you, because I was intrigued when I was learning about you that you were in the financial space and now you're in the medical space. So I was like, I wonder how that happened. So
And I started my career in advertising because life is weird.
now you're bringing all of your knowledge together
That's
and
right. Yeah.
supporting MedVector's growth. So I love it, which we'll dive into. So Scott, in what ways does your model that you're doing help reduce patient leakage and improve diversity in clinical trials?
So by incorporating everyone's doctor.
Mm,
So right now, the current thinking is everybody wants to be an investigator, as in every doctor. So let's make every doctor an investigator for clinical trials. Well, then you start to go talk to those doctors, and the doctors say, I don't want to do that. I want to focus on patient care. So what MedVector does is it enables that doctor to continue being focused on patient care because we handle all of the clinical trial components through telemedicine. So as a patient can now access a clinical trial from their local doctor without that doctor having any responsibility or obligation. And so and we're also able to compensate that physician for the time that we spend in their office. So it's that kind of trifecta of what was missing because doctors actually like clinical research. So if you were to ask a doctor, I've got this new potential drug that does XYZ, they'd say, wow, great. I can think of 10 patients off the top of my head that would be a great candidate for that. Can I prescribe it? You say, no, you have to become an investigator. No, thanks. Right? So if they could prescribe it, like prescribing a clinical trial. All of a sudden they're interested. They're like, yeah, I can think of a bunch of patients this would be good for. And so that's the lock that we've unlocked, right? Is that it's not so much a patient education problem, it's a patient access problem.
Right. And you're getting in front of the people who have the patients. So now
Bingo.
the access door has been unlocked for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now,
So
and the interesting thing is this scales up too from just the physicians, because right now a physician is, and so this is what you were just commenting on, a small patient population pool, right? Well, what's a bigger patient population pool? How about CVS, right? So CVS has a ton of patient data, but they
yeah.
can't sell it and they can't give it away. So what MedVector can do is we say, okay, if you identify the patients for the clinical studies and reach out to those patients and get them interested in the clinical studies, well, then we can host those visits from your CVS Minute clinics.
Wow.
So now you can participate from a clinical study from a CVS. Now, this is still in work, so I'm not claiming that we have a partnership with CVS or anything like that, but this is the concept of how the concept scales. So it's also true with a company called LabCorp that people are familiar with. So LabCorp has a ton of patient data because they're the ones that do all the labs for everybody. And so imagine if LabCorp was able to reach out to you as a patient and say, you are potentially eligible for this clinical study. And just to, divert back just a little bit, when we think about clinical trials, a lot of times people think about guinea pigs and they think about testing new medicines. The majority of clinical trials are actually new versions of something that already exists. So I know that you, as a patient, you have this side effect. Well, there's a new version that doesn't have that side effect. Would you like to try it? Yes. Yes, I would love to try that. Or you're allergic to the existing version. You probably aren't allergic to this new version. Would you like to try it? Yes. Or the existing version is a painful needle that you have to do once a day. Well, there's a new version that you only have to do once a month. Are you interested? Yes. So a lot of the clinical studies that are out there are actually versions of medications that people are interested in. It's not the guinea pig thing that we kind of like to kind of place it in our heads.
That's a great misconception to clear up because I thought I was under the same impression. I thought, okay, these clinical trials, whenever you hear clinical trial, it's a brand new product or medicine coming on the market that we have no idea what the side effects are yet. And we are the guinea pigs that are trying it. So that's great clarity. So now for anybody listening, if you are going through something and are approached about a clinical trial, most likely it's going to be a step up from what they've already had.
And the industry today, it's come so far from experimental, right? So technically, because it's a new version of a medication, it's still under the experimental category, but we're no longer experimenting on people, right? We're not combining two things and going, I wonder what'll happen if we do this. So it's already gone through computer modeling, it's gone through animal testing typically. And so we already know what the human tolerance should be. We already know what the efficacy should be. We already know what the side effects should be. And the clinical study is to verify that we're right about those things. And sometimes it does show new side effects. And sometimes those side effects are unrelated, to be honest, but they still have to list them as side effects. And so yeah, the industry it's a lot safer than it used to be 30 years ago.
Yeah. So Scott, you mentioned physicians and then CVS as your target market or the people that you reach out to in order to, have more patients coming into these clinical trials. Can you share with us who is your target market and how have you grown since you got started? Because were you just focused on physicians now and now you're thinking outside the box and getting into like more companies like CVS and seeing like, oh, who else has access to the patients?
Well, so we're similar to like Uber's model, right? To where it's a marketplace. There's two sides of it, right? So Uber has to find drivers and passengers, okay? So when you ask Uber who your customer is, it's kind of a tricky answer because is it people that need rides or is it drivers? And you have to actually market to both of them to make sure that marketplace works. Similar to like an eBay, you need buyers and sellers. And so MedVector, we need the buyers, which is pharma, or also called sponsors, and then we need the patients. And the way that we've kind of bifurcated patients is we say instead of going after patients themselves, we're going to go after the people that have the patients, right? So this could be CVS or a physician. And so the supply side of our model has been really easy because doctors are very interested. We find the patients that are very interested. The challenge, believe it or not, has actually been pharma. And it's interesting. So behind me, this is Petey.
Hi, Petey.
Petey is the pharma dino. So dinosaurs in any company are bad, right? Because it's old world thinking, and I don't know if you can read it, but it says change is scary. So this is the pharma dino, and the thing that gets rid of the pharma dino are mergers and layoffs. And that's what we're seeing right now in pharma. So we've actually been taking, pretty good strides lately. But what we see a lot is, wow, this is really cool, but not my study. My study is too complex. And I
Mhm.
think about that and I go, how is it possible that your study is too complex? The the mandate from the FDA says you have to prove efficacy and patient safety through standardized data. So tell me what medical procedure are you doing that isn't standardized? Oh, well, they can't. And so that's where our real pushback has been from the pharma side. And so it's adoption that has been the biggest challenge for us because when an industry is so set in their ways, even if those ways are failing, like in clinical research, so 90% of clinical studies fail to enroll on time, 90%. So what does that tell you? Are they firing 90% of their employees every year? Nope. So what's happened is there's now permission to fail inside pharma. And so there's actually more risk for somebody to stick their neck outside the box on to the downside as there is to the upside, because the upside is, well, the study succeeded. Great. It's one of the few.
Yeah.
There isn't any, incentivization process for studies, happening more quickly. So it's been quite a journey for us trying to build and create adoption.
So how are you now that you do have shared those two sides of the coins, the pharma and then the patients, which you
Mhm.
said that's kind of a little easier to get to. How are you getting in front of, say, pharma? How what's working for you as far as marketing goes? And then also on the flip side, how are you getting in front of those physicians to reach those patients and like CVS and things like that? Or is it mostly digital outreach? Is it picking up the phone? Is it in person, conferences, getting in front of these or medical, conferences? What are you doing?
It's primarily networking. And so I like to say we've had to carve our own seat at the table. So in this industry, because it's so, rooted in science, it's very slow moving. And so it requires a certain pedigree. So finance guy, not in the industry, coming in and going, hey, I got the solution that nobody's thought of. They go, uh-huh, sure. So we've had to carve our seat at the table. We've had to build our credibility. So I do a lot of things like this. So, we do a lot of podcasts. We did some explainer videos, which are actually, they've won awards, our explainer videos.
Oh,
So in fact, our first explainer video has been deemed one of the best whiteboard explainer videos ever, which is pretty neat. So we've had to do that as far as explaining a complex topic quickly and also fun. But the way that we've had the most success is meeting people. And so a lot of the ways that I'm meeting people is through these podcasts, and somebody will reach out, building credibility. So after you've met someone, it is much better to be introduced to somebody than it is to do a cold outreach, because then you get to stand on their shoulders a little bit. We brought on board members that were, pillars of this industry. And so getting their help in those introductions and credibility and getting them to speak on our behalf. has been a big help. And then I would say, lastly, conferences. So at first glance, conferences feel like a huge lift and waste of time conceptually. But having a presence at a conference really does build credibility.
Mhm.
So I would say that is if you can afford it, the primary push is conferences because that's where it starts the networking to where you can, build off of that.
Yeah, the conversations get started and you're actually meeting and corresponding with the person face to face, which is
Right.
definitely helpful. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, if I could give you, yeah, I think you already told us about your challenges, so I don't want to go back into that. But if I could give you a magic wand, Scott, and you could go poof over one issue you're having right now, that you could just take it away, what would it be and why?
I'd get rid of the fear factor
Mm.
of these guys. I'd get rid of the knee-jerk reaction of no, that won't work. I'd remove the so right now pharma's broken. And the reason that pharma's broken is it's an industry that must be rooted in innovation. And right now it values caution over innovation. So and so the way that I like to explain this is over the last 30 years, the way that pharma identifies the smartest person in the room is different than any other company that I've ever seen. So instead of the person who's, you know, brainstorming and raising their hand and being vocal, the smartest person in the room in pharma is the person who could identify the risk that nobody else could see, which sounds like a real asset in some situations. But the problem is this culture has permeated the entire industry to where that's who's been promoted. So when you have an entire industry whose the people that they're promoting are the people who are looking for the risks that nobody else can see, you start getting really bad questions, risk focused questions. You get knee-jerk reactions of, nope, there's got to be a risk. I don't see it. And I'm not going to admit that I'm not smart enough to see it. So I'm not going to make a decision. So then there's a lack of decision-making ability within the industry. So this is, all these are the symptoms. But the biggest thing that happens when you have a culture that values risk over innovation, it is you end up promoting and creating a culture internally of the best people in the world at saying no.
Mm.
And so you want to know why pharma's broken? That's why. Is because the culture is broken internally, and there's too many of these guys that think, nope, scary, I don't get it. There's got to be a risk that I don't see, and I'm not going to admit it.
Which is a huge bottleneck and why we're seeing these trials take 14 years.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So, from your view, Scott, what are the key trends in the clinical trial ecosystem? What are you seeing as for the trends over the next, say, 3 to 5 years, especially around remote and hybrid models?
Well, so the FDA has just released guidance on what it is that we do. It's called decentralized clinical trials, so DCT. And that has been a big win for us and the industry because it's giving pharma permission to start looking at solutions. So there's a lot of the innovation department that are starting to push down toward the study teams being like, there isn't the risk that you see here. Or if there is a risk, explain it to me so we can see it too. And then they can't. So it's given a little bit of authority to the people that didn't have it before. And so that's been a real positive.
So, what's next for MedVector, Scott? Over the next 12 months, what are the big goals?
Well, we're once again raising capital. Hopefully, we're going into our Series A within the next 12 months. And so that guidance came out about a year ago. And again, I said pharma is very slow moving. So we're just starting to see the movement and contracting with us. So our goal is growth.
So, if we could bring you back in the next, say, 12 months from now, if we can bring you back in a year from now, and revisit this conversation, what does success look like for you or MedVector?
Uh, All right, so you're touching on my fears now. So so what does success look like? There's two big fears that I have. And so rather than talking about success, I'll talk about the fears because if we can address these fears, then we will be successful. The first one is what I call getting to the starting line. And this is adoption, right? So if we don't get enough pharma teams to adopt to our strategy, well, then quite simply, we run out of money before we're viable, right? So it's getting to the starting line. I'm not worried about the finish line. Once we get to the starting line, the product that we have is so good and really has the ability to change the industry and the world for the better. I don't see an issue once we get there. But that brings up my second fear is once these floodgates do open, because I see them opening up very slowly at first and then just pow. Once that happens, my biggest fear is not scaling quickly enough and creating a vacuum in the industry that would draw our lift to Uber.
Mm. Well, it's time for you to share where people can find you and connect with you. So where can they do that and also learn more about MedVector?
Well, you can go to medvector.com and we've got some of our explainer videos there. Our award-winning explainer video, though, you'd have to Google because that's not on our website because it's an older video. And there's contact information there on the website as well.
Amazing. So we're going to have all of Scott's information inside the show notes. So if you're driving, we got you. No worries. You can go to medvector.com and check them out. If you're watching us on YouTube, hello, we're happy to have you here with us. Make sure you drop Scott a note below so he knows you saw him here. And if you know of anybody that would be supported by learning more about MedVector, please share this episode with them. Our goal is to support more businesses and their growth. Scott's spending time with us today, sharing what's working for them, what hasn't worked, and also sharing about his company. So we really want to support him and getting the word out there. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform and you can leave a review, we'd love 5 stars. That helps the platform push this podcast and this episode out to more people. I promised y'all a gift, so here it is. If you're looking to grow your visibility and your business and you feel like you've tried different things, Scott shared what's working for him in person, really, builds that authority for them. If you've been trying things but feel like you're not getting anywhere, go ahead and download our Spotlight to Scale blueprint. You can go to spotlighttoscale.com/blueprint. It's free. It's yours. Let us know what you think. Scott, before I let you go, is there anything that you'd like to share or say that we didn't talk about, or I didn't get to ask you, or we didn't touch on today?
Nope, I tend to be a bit of a talker. I think we got
I
it.
love it. Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It helps me. It helps me come up with more questions for you. So thank you for your time today. Thank you, PD, for joining us today too. Scott, it's been such a pleasure for you listening. Make sure you go check out MedVector, medvector.com. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Business Growth Spotlights.